Amen. Well, thank you very much. Well, as the year started, we started a series of messages entitled Slaying Our Giants. Slaying Our Giants. And this week, the giant that we're looking to slay is guilt. Now, I'm not asking for a show of hands, so don't stick your hand up. But has anybody ever felt guilty about anything? We all have, right? We can all stick our hands up. And it's something similar, something we did or didn't do or could have done or we felt could have gone differently. There's 10,000 different ways the equation could go that could cause us to feel guilty. Some of it might be justified, some of it not. We just never know. But guilt is one of those things that can grip us and hold on to us. Now, the song that Gail just read for us was written by King David. Now, the Bible tells us that David was a man after God's own heart. Man, don't you wish that Scripture would record each one of us as a man or a woman after God's own heart? Yes. One that has his or her focus on the things of God and the way God wants them done. That's what David was. But we all know that David was not perfect. I've used this example before, if I held a white bed sheet up here, and that bed sheet was totally white, except for one little black speck. And I ask you, what do you see? 99 out of 100 would say, I see a black speck. Most people would say, well, I see all that light. There's a lot of light on there, but there's a black speck. That black speck in David's life was the sin of adultery and of murder of another man's wife. But David was a man after God's own heart, and he wrote this particular psalm, we believe, shortly after all of that came down. He had committed adultery. He had Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. He, in essence, had him murdered in battle because he put him on the front lines where no one survived on the front lines. And he did that knowingly just so he could take this man's life for his own. It was a no-no then, it's a no-no now in God's scheme of things. But David, because he was a man after God's own heart, God's Spirit dealt with him, as God's Spirit will deal with us. We're guilty people. We just need to face that fact. We're guilty of bad thoughts. We're guilty of false statements. We're guilty of hurtful deeds. Like David, we've done things wrong. Maybe not to the effect that he did, but we've done things wrong. And we fail to live up to God's perfect standard of righteousness. God wants all of us to be perfect, and that's why He sent His Son Jesus Christ, because through Him we can have forgiveness of sins. First of all, let's just real quick, what is guilt again? What is guilt? It's a dread of the past. It's a pain that wells up within our hearts because we committed an offense or we failed to do something. I remember talking with a man years and years ago in another church. His biggest fear, he was guilty because he had been, for lack of a better word, he'd been a scoundrel in his younger years. And he lived all those years trying to make up for the misdeeds, whatever they were. I didn't get into specifics with him. But they gnawed at him so much, and his biggest fear, he was guilty. He felt, he was afraid someone someday would find out, as he said it, who I really am. The things that I did, he said that they were wrong. Much like David, right? So I assured him that if he faced those sins, whatever they were, the same way that David faced this sin. I don't know about you, but if you're going to rank sins, murder and adultery they got to make the top 2 or 3. That's right up there as far as a ranking of sins. And David brought those to God. He brought those to God. We're going to address that here in just a couple minutes. But a lot of people, like this gentleman I just mentioned, they live in fear that someone will discover their past or who they feel they really are. And so they work overtime just to show everybody else, including God, that they're truly repentant. Guilt can cripple us. It can bring us to a place that we just don't want to be. I was reading in a side article too where some of these, I'm not a psychologist and I don't play one on TV. But I was reading that psychologists, some of the studies that they have done, they said most people spend at least 2 hours a day feeling guilty about something. Feeling guilty about something. I've had a conversation this past week with my folks. My folks are caring for a 102-year-old lady down in Paris, Tennessee. And for those of you who have met my folks, you know that my mom is 85, going on 86 pretty soon, and Dad is 87, going on 88. They're approaching that time when they cannot do physically what they've been doing. And Mom's still recovering from the fall and all of that. So with this particular lady, some of her distant kin want to put her in a retirement rest home. That is killing them. That is killing them because they feel guilty because they want to be able to still take care of her. They want to be able to do the things that they have for her these past dozen or so years. But as their lives become more interesting, and then their needs change, they have to adjust. And they come to the place where I think they are at peace with whatever decision the family makes regarding this woman. That's one thing with my mom. Either my dad's parents or my mom's parents spend a day in the nursing home. You may have situations of difference where once you had to do things, but it's just something that they felt guilty about. And they cared for their parents. Much when my brothers and I were trying to figure out what we're going to do for Mom and Dad when that day comes. I mean, I want them to be like Don and Norma Jean here, you know, that just keep going. I'm Energizer Bunny, right? Energizer Bunny, yeah. But we understand all of that with this attitude of guilt. We want to do things, and sometimes, whatever the reasons are, they may be valid reasons, but we still feel guilty about not being able to do what we've done. Guilt will eat us up. But so it's not all bad. Not all bad, because guilt can be a good thing, because guilt will keep me. Just take a relationship with my marriage with Catherine. I love Catherine more than anything in the world. I've expressed that to her time and time again. But if I do what David did with Bathsheba, with someone else, that would inflict on me such horrible guilt. Such horrible guilt, because I know that I had violated the vows that I made to my special lady, Kathy. What a horrible thing that would be to heap upon myself. So knowing what that guilt would be, knowing what the consequences of breaking those promises would be, that can, and the thoughts of that guilt, keeps me in line. Helps keep me alive. There's much more than that keeps me alive. That's one of them. That's like one of those last barriers of defenses. When we do what's right because it's right. And God wants us to do that. Kind of like pain, right? When our arm hurts, our back hurts, our leg hurts, there's a reason for that usually. Some of us can probably say, no, mine just hurts. But there's a reason. I mean, not too long ago, Bill, I was doing something, and my hand was just starting to hurt it. And I looked down, and I had this big old sliver right in my hand, kind of wedged up between the fingers. I have no idea how it got there, but you know it hurt. Hurt like the dickens, as Grandma used to say. Hurt like the dickens. So that pain told me something was wrong and I could deal with it. And that's the way we have to use guilt this morning. That's the way David used guilt. And that's the way that we can slay that giant. When we know something is wrong, we have to deal with it. So real quick this morning, what do we do about the pain of guilt? How can we relieve it from Psalm 32? Of all people, David had reason for feeling guilty, as I've told you already, with the murder and the adultery that he committed. His guilt was immense. He said in that verse 4 that Gail read for us, "My guilt has overwhelmed me, like a burden too heavy to bear." This psalm that Gail read offers us practical advice that we can slay this giant of guilt, that we can be released from that guilt. And in verse 5 of chapter 32, tells us that the first thing we have to do is we have to admit that guilt to God. You don't have to tell me anything, you don't have to tell anybody else anything, but God already knows what we've done, and He knows our heart and our attitude toward it. So when David said, "I acknowledge my sin unto you, and my iniquity have I not hid. I will confess my sins or my transgressions unto you, O Lord, and you will forgive all my iniquity." Confession. We've heard that phrase, right? Confession is good for the soul. Confession doesn't undo the consequences for whatever sin we had. David's confession here did not bring back Uriah, Bathsheba's husband. It did not restore a marriage. There were still consequences for his sin. There's consequences always for sin in each of our lives. And we need to understand that. But God doesn't want us to walk around defeated and weak all the time if we truly will come to Him and repent. We need to admit that guilt. The first step to recovery is admitting that something in our lives was wrong, whatever that might be. I know several here that are recovering alcoholics, and we've had these conversations in Bible study. When those meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous begin, I believe that they say, "My name is so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic." And it begins from there. We define our terms of who we are and where we are, but it doesn't define who we can be and that we can be forgiven for whatever we've done. We've got to admit, though, that there's a problem before we can deal with it, before we can slay that giant. Then we've got to confront. Secondly, confront that guilt. In verse 5, David said to the Lord, again, he said, "I did not conceal my iniquity." He stopped trying to hide his sin. Ever know somebody who you know had done something wrong and they just kept trying to hide it? I mean, everybody knew what was going on, but they kept trying to hide it. They wouldn't admit that there was a problem. They wouldn't admit that there was something wrong. David said, I quit trying to hide it, Lord. You know my heart. You know what I did? I messed up. It's got to be confronted and dealt with, or guilt will deal with us. It'll affect your psychology. David says there in verse 3, he says, "When I kept silent, my bones became brittle from my groaning all day long." Ever been there where something had you so upset and you felt so guilty because your body just ached because you knew what you'd done was wrong? You knew that the result was wrong. And you just ached over it. You ached. That's what David is saying here. My heart just hurt. My body just hurt. I just shut down. I had to confront this guilt. It affected David physically. In verse 4 of the same chapter, he says, "My strength was drained from me as in the days of summer heat." Now, as much of an Energizer bunny as Don is, on those hot summer days, Don, with 90 plus degrees, you probably wear out just a little bit sooner than you do when it's 70, right? That's a given. I mean, that summer heat will just drain us. It'll just drain us. The heat, and humility. And that's what David is saying here. You know, that's the way this guilt worked on him. It just drained him physically, where he had no strength. Had no strength. What a horrible thing that is. But we need to confront that guilt. We need to confess it too. In that same verse 5, he says, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord. This is the next step of recovery. We need to tell God like it is. Now, one thing I want to be very sure of here is when we say confess, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Confession this morning is not telling God something that He doesn't already know. Do you get that? That's probably the most important part of what we're talking about today. Confession is not telling God something that you've done or that I've done that He doesn't already know. Confession is agreeing with God that what we've done or where we're at was dead wrong and needs to be dealt with. So if we confess our sins to Him, God, I messed up. I messed up. David says, God, I messed up. I let my eyes tell me that what I was doing was okay. I let my heart tell me that what I was doing was okay. I let my actions tell me, and my decisions tell me that what I was doing to send a man to his death, I let that tell me that it was okay, but it wasn't. It wasn't, Father. I agree with your assessment that it was wrong. David confessed to God that what he had done was wrong. Still consequences. Still things we can do, but that's where the step for guilt has to be dispelled. Guilt is only dispelled when truth is told. One of the things that I instilled in my kids when they were young was this phrase: if you lie, you will always get in trouble. If you lie, you will always get in trouble. And it was a great blessing for me to hear my sons tell his kids that one day. He's kept that in his heart. Has he been perfect? I doubt it. I doubt it. But lying is breaking trust. It's breaking trust. And God doesn't want us to do that. So we need to face that guilt. We need to confess that guilt. And only with doing that, if we'll admit it, we'll confront it, we'll confess it. In verses 1 and 5, David said, God will forget that guilt. He says, you took away the guilt from me. In verse 5, God forgets our confessed sin, and so should we. Those sins are gone forever. But the thing that we wrestle with, and I can speak from personal opinion personal decision rather, because the devil is always there with me, telling me in the other ear, oh no, he's not forgiven it. We know what God said, but He really remembers it, and you're still on the hook for it. If God says it's done, it's done. You've got to face it, you've got to claim it, you've got to believe it. Like I said, the effects of things that we do or don't do might still remain. There's still consequences, but if God forgives sin, it is forgiven. And that giant is slain. That giant is slain in your life and in my life. As God moves in our hearts. When David confessed his sin to God, suddenly his sin and his guilt, they were gone forever. And that's actually how it is for us. We confess, God erases, and as He forgets, we need to. What giants are there in your life? Guilt-related today. You can face them the same way David did in Psalm 32, verses 1 through 5. God will give you the peace and the wisdom to make those wise choices. Amen? Amen. Slay those giants.